All right, guys, welcome back to the Elevate My KBB podcast. I'm Jacob Iwowo, your host, and this show is all about helping remodeling companies like yours generate more leads, close more sales, and grow without burning out, right? So in the last couple of episodes, we've spoken about, speed to lead and structure and follow up and how that, impacts your ability to book new leads, right? But here's the thing, not every single lead is actually created equal. A homeowner who kind of filled out your form yesterday isn't the same as someone who spoke to you 8 months ago and kind of ghosted you after an estimate, right? And a referral lead isn't going to be the same as, let's say, a home advisor lead, right? So if you're treating all of these leads the same, then you're 100% going to be missing out on deals that you should be closing. So today, I'm going to be breaking down the 4 types of leads that you're going to come across as a home improvement company and how you should be adjusting your sales approach to book more appointments and close more jobs, no matter where the leads come from. And if you ever wondered why your script works great on one lead, but it kind of completely falls flat on other types of leads, then this episode should hopefully help you kind of connect the dots. So let's actually get into it. So most remodeling companies that I found kind of operate on this idea that there are good leads and there are bad ones, right? But the reality is that the vast majority of leads that are bad, that's not actually the case. They're just misunderstood in the context of that company, right? And what I mean by that is that if you're running the exact same process, you're running the exact same scripts, you're delivering the exact same tone with every single lead that comes in, then you're going to be able to connect with some, but with other leads, you're just going to completely miss, the target, right? So the key in this is that not every single lead that you get is going to want or need the same thing from you, right? Their specific motivation, their timeline, their mindset, even like their just general expectations of you as a company are going to be completely different depending on when in the timeline they came into you. Well, they came into your business, right? So when a homeowner fills out a form, right, or when they get referred by a neighbor, for example, or for example, when they come back from ghosting you, in all 3 of those circumstances, it's the exact same contact information, but it's a completely different psychology, right? So rather than coming at leads from a perspective of good and bad, smart companies and smart remodeling companies are actually going to categorize the different leads and build them based off the different types that they come across, right? And again, these aren't completely new kind of sales strategies for each one. It's just kind of micro changes within each. So first things first, let's talk about the kind of 4 categories that I think that you should be thinking about your leads, right? So the first is going to be inbound leads, right? So these are going to be people that filled out a form, they responded to an ad, they visited your site recently. And in these cases, these are high urgency, emotionally driven leads. And they're often, in most cases, because they've kind of, quickly come and filled out a form, they're often uneducated about the process and what that looks like, right? And the thing that matters most to these leads is going to be speed, it's going to be clarity, and it's going to be structure. And we'll talk about all of these in a little bit. The second type of lead that you come across is a referral lead, right? So that's going to come from a past customer, a vendor you work with, a partner you work with, right? And these are going to be lower resistance leads, but they are also going to be high expectation, right? So with these leads, they're going to expect professionalism and systems. And unfortunately, the negative of those is that they are not going to be as forgiving as cold traffic because they come in with those high expectations, right? The third category is old leads, right? So these are past leads that you've kind of had touch points with before, but they've either ghosted, they stalled, they went cold, whatever, right? And in this case, they've already been exposed to your brand, and that can be good or bad, and it can be, a long exposure or short exposure. But with these leads, they're going to require what I would refer to as an urgency reconstruction, right? And what that means is that you need to actually be able to re-spark the problem that they once wanted to be solved in a smart way to actually get them re-engaged, right? And then the fourth lead, and the lead that you hear the most about, is our aggregated leads, right? Think home advisor, Angie, Checker Trade, Thumbtack, these type of companies, right? And in most cases, despite what a lot of you guys will say, these are usually highly motivated leads, but they're shopping with multiple vendors, right? And because of that, they very frequently have a very transactional mindset. So they're kind of they're price sensitive, and they're also overwhelmed by the process. So in this case, you need to make sure that you're differentiating yourself very clearly and very quickly, or you're just going to become part of the noise and you're going to kind of say that these leads are low quality, right? So the reason why this matters is because each lead is going to enter your pipeline at a different stage of trust, right? And if you treat them all just like let's say a fresh inbound lead, you're going to oversell the ones that are warm and you're going to undersell the ones that are cold, right? And you're going to completely kind of miss that emotional gap that you find between the different types of leads, right? At the end of the day, we're going to lose a sale if we assume that, if we assume where the intent of that lead is at that moment in time, right? Instead, we need to understand where they came from and tailor the perspective and the process around that, right? So again, those are the 4 types. And once we understand what type of lead we're speaking to, then the next thing we need to think about is, okay, how do we adjust our messaging and our process to match that mindset? And here's the reality, right? If 2 homeowners want the exact same remodel, how they found you is going to have to or should completely change how you communicate to them, right? So as we spoke about quickly, inbound leads, they need speed and direction. Referral leads, they need reassurance. Reactivated leads, they need to kind of have that trust rebuilt, and aggregated leads need that clarity and that kind of differentiated positioning, right? And if you speak to all of them the same way, then as we said, you're either going to be underselling or overselling. So let's actually go into more detail about how you should be handling those leads. So to start with that inbound lead, because they're emotionally activated and at that point where they click the form, they would have done so because they've been pushed over the edge by something. They're going to want to hear certain things from you. They want to obviously see that you saw their request and that you saw it quickly. They want to understand that you they want to know that you understand their problem, and they want to also know that you've helped people that are just like them and you can actually get them scheduled in quickly, right? So here, you're not necessarily building as much trust as you are building certainty, right? That process is going to be even more trust heavy. You don't want them to just trust you, but you want them to be certain that they made the right decision by coming to your website and filling out your form specifically, right? Now, in the case of a kind of referral lead, as we said, they're the warmest, right? They've been told that you're the guy, right? So they're going to want a smooth and professional experience, right? They're going to want to hear that you take their referral seriously, that they've got a process that you can trust, and that you're going to, protect the reputation of the person that referred them, right? So with these leads, you want to, show them your system, right? Not just your personality, right? You want to have them understand what the back end's going to look like so that they know that they're in the right place based off what, the referee has told them. Now, with these old leads, obviously they were ghosted you, they went cold, right? And in many cases, they're not new, right? But they did have pain, right? So I would define them as like a wounded lead, right? And it could have been that just the timing was off when they first reached out. Maybe they just didn't feel ready. Maybe it was actually a you problem and you didn't follow up with them enough, right? So with those old leads, they're going to want to be reminded of the problem that they were kind of originally there to solve. They need a new reason to believe in you, whether that's, additional testimonials, whether it's a change to the process, whether it's, renewed availability, right? And then the last thing is they need to know that the door is still open to them, but they need to know that without applying pressure to them, right? It's more about kind of rebuilding that urgency for them internally and then establishing that trust with them so that you don't sound pushy or desperate, right? And then the messaging that you're going to have with the aggregated lead, again, is going to be different from all of these. That lead is actively shopping. They've likely had multiple people reach out to them, and because of that, they're overwhelmed. So they're going to want to make sure, or they're going to want to hear that there's a clear differentiation, right? You want to sound different from these other contractors. In this case, proof and other things that are going to build trust are going to be incredibly important. Reviews, photos, guarantees, the whole nine with these leads. And then it also needs to be a very clear and simple process to actually book in the next steps, right? You need to make sure in this case that you're kind of breaking through the noise and you're coming across as a confident choice. And the biggest problem that I found is that, again, we've kind of spoken about how the messaging should look, but across almost every company that I speak to and work with, they simply just have one script, or they have one email template, or they have one pitch, right? And then they use that for every single lead when we've just spoken about the fact that each of them are going to need a different process, right? So, now that we've spoken about the messaging, let's kind of get a little bit more specific about how the process would look a little bit different, right? So there's going to be a couple of main things that you're going to be changing between the different leads, right? Those are speed, follow-up persistence, pre-qualification, and then, the sales team's kind of like handoff timing, right? So with that being said, if you're trying to run a reactivated lead through, the same kind of speed to close pipeline that you'd use for like an inbound lead, it's going to like overwhelm them, right? So again, let's break that down lead by lead, right? For the inbound leads, again, they need an instant response, right? Again, they're emotionally charged, so we want to capture that emotion right away. And in most cases, you're going to want to use automation to do so, right? So ideally, within the first 60 seconds, we want to respond. It should be, where possible, by phone, but, a text or an email is better than nothing. And then again, if they don't pick up, we want to, making sure that we're following up same day. And again, in other videos, I've kind of gone through, a process that we can use to be able to target these leads. But when we do get on the phone with inbound leads, we want to make sure that we don't overcomplicate the call, right? The most important thing is that with these people, because they've come to us, we don't want to like over qualify them, right? We want to get them booked in, right, while they're emotionally charged, and then we can qualify them later. So we don't want them to kind of go through like a 10-step intake process. We don't want to spend, 20 minutes qualifying their budget and going through timelines and things of that nature before we've actually looked to book the appointment. Remember, we want them to know that we saw their requests quickly, that we understand their problem, and that we've helped people just like them. Once we've established that on that first call, we can then try and get them booked in. And after the fact, let's try and qualify them and make sure that, we're not wasting our team's time in going and out to the appointment. But with these emotional leads, not just speed to lead, but also speed to appointment while they're emotionally charged is important. Now, with these referral leads, right, they're not going to be trying to figure out whether you're legit, right? They just want to know whether their friend made a good choice by actually referring them to you, right? So with these leads, they don't need to be necessarily rushed through that process. They just need to be confident. So for me, that process means that we need to first acknowledge that, and speak to the trust that's been transferred through the referral process, right? We can do that through, by name, saying exactly who referred them and letting them know that we value our referral process. We want to let them know that they're in the right place, right? And we want to validate their decision of, actually moving forward with the referral and, reaching out to you without rushing them through that process, right? So again, we want to, this is a very, very key thing. Make sure we mention the referrers by name, right? First name, have that in the notes, making sure that they know, hey, Sarah, told us you were going to be reaching out, and we really appreciate her, trusting in us to handle your service. And then, try with these leads to add a little bit more of kind of a white glove element, right? So whether it's sending a pre-appointment confirmation with a picture or a short intro video, right? These little like white glove things can really kind of lock in an appointment and make both yourself and the person that referred you look good, because in this instance, professionalism and structure are the key, right? Now, in the case of these kind of old leads, right? These are, leads that, again, they don't need to be convinced the same way that a inbound or a aggregated lead needs to be, right? As we spoke about earlier, they need to be reconnected to the original problem that they reached out to you for, and also shown that the solution that you provide is still a valid one, right? And in an ideal world, it needs to be an even better one than they have now. So with that said, these leads should never, ever go through your default intake sequence, right? They need to have a special reactivation flow that has different scripts, different emails, SMSs, completely different energy. And that process is going to start with value. So whether it's, a new offer, recent wins, they have certain, availability, right? There needs to be a whole process that kind of helps remind them why they reached out to you in the first place, and then kind of reframe what changed in the interim. And then, with these aggregated leads, we need to remember that they didn't come to you directly. They came to a third-party platform, and they've been sent to multiple contractors. So these are highly, highly time-sensitive leads, the most time-sensitive leads that you have, and they frequently come in high volume, right? So ideally, you want to be first. Speed really, really matters. And again, with that being said, you want to have a structured cadence that includes immediate SMSs and calls. It involves follow-ups in the same days, and then daily touch points for at least, 3 to 4 days after that initial point of contact. And during that process, we want to clearly remind them exactly what the rep's name is and the company name in every single message, because during that process, they may forget who's who, right? And again, it's your responsibility as a owner to make sure that your intake team doesn't need to guess, right? So you don't need to build a brand new system for every single lead. You just need to have variations of that same one so that your team knows how to work these leads, right? And if they don't know where the lead came from, then you're going to be winging it, right? So that's where your CRM comes into place. You need to be able to tag each lead by its source and ideally by its type, so your lead knows, so your rep knows exactly who they're talking to, what mindset that lead's probably going to be in, and how they should adjust their approach, right? So if we kind of look at this from the big picture, again, if you're treating every lead the same, with the same script, the same cadence, the same, tonality, then I'm telling you right now, you are leaving money on the table. And every single lead isn't created equal, but there are different ways to handle each of them. So again, to kind of leave you with kind of the keys for each of the 4 types of leads. The inbound leads are going to need that speed and that certainty. The referrals are going to need that structure and the reassurance. Those old leads are going to need that kind of trust rebuild, that trust reconstruction. And the aggregated leads need a clear and differentiated process, right? And if you understand the kind of psychology of every single one of these leads, and you kind of, again, adjust your messaging, your process, your follow-up in the right way, then what it's going to allow you to do is stop kind of, playing defense in your pipeline and actually take control of exactly who is coming through and how you're going to handle them. Because in most cases, in order to scale your remodeling company, it's not about working harder. It's not about spending more money on leads. It's just about working smarter and actually matching the way that you sell to the way these people buy. Because if you can, increase your closing rate by 5-10%, what is that going to do to both your top and your bottom line, right? And this is a key way that a lot of, remodeling companies are missing out in being able to do so. So with that said, guys, that's it for the episode today on Elevate My KBB podcast. Look, if this kind of gave you clarity on, lead flow and how to handle it, or just spark some ideas, then please do me a favor. Share this episode with at least one person in the industry that, needs to hear this. And if you want to connect with me directly, feel free to reach out to me at Iwowo at elevatemarketinggroup.co.uk. That's JIWOWO at ELEVATEMARKETINGGROUP.co.uk. Or feel free to find me on LinkedIn at Jacob Iwowo. And I, love to kind of hear how you guys are kind of applying this stuff. And again, of course, make sure to follow the podcast so that you don't miss the next episode. See you guys then.